I thought burying my father would be the hardest part of returning to Ashford Glen, but I was wrong. Standing there while my sister Meredith wept perfect tears in designer silk, I had no idea she had already filed a lawsuit to destroy me. She did not just want the millions in the estate. She wanted to erase me from the family history entirely, and I never saw the betrayal coming until it was too late. The rain in Ashford Glen did not wash things clean. It only made the slate roofs of the Victorian mansions shine like wet iron and turned the manicured lawns of the cemetery into a deep, sucking mud. I stood at the edge of the grave, my heels sinking into the softened earth, and watched the mahogany casket lower into the ground. It was an elegant box for a man whose life had become a series of locked rooms and quiet phone calls. My sister, Meredith, stood 10 feet away from me. She looked like a queen in exile, draped in black wool that cost more than my car. Her husband, Richard, held an umbrella over her head, shielding her from the drizzle. But nothing shielded me. I stood alone. That was how it had been for the last 5 years. And I told myself I preferred it that way. Meredith did not look at me. She stared straight ahead at the brass handles of the casket. Her face a mask of perfectly composed grief. Around us, the elite of Ashford Glen huddled in their trench coats. There were board members from Cooper Hale Industries, old golfing partners from the country club, and women who had played bridge with our mother before she passed away 10 years ago. They whispered to one another, their eyes darting toward me and then quickly away. I was the prodigal daughter, the one who left, the one who did not belong in this circle of wealth and silence. I adjusted the collar of my coat, feeling the dampness seep through the fabric. I was 33 years old, yet standing here, in the shadow of the weeping willows and the Cooper family mausoleum, I felt like a child who had been sent to her room for misbehaving. When the service ended, the crowd dispersed toward the fleet of black town cars waiting on the asphalt path. I intended to go straight to my rental car and drive back to the motel. But a man in a charcoal suit intercepted me. He had the sleek, predatory look of someone who billed by the minute. "Miss Cooper," he said, stepping into my path, "I am deeply sorry for your loss. I did not know him, but I knew his type." "Thank you," I said, keeping my voice level. "I am Garrett Vane," he said. "I represent your sister. I understand you are anxious to have the will reading concluded so you can return to your life in the city. However, there has been a slight delay." "A delay?" I asked. "My father died 4 days ago. The funeral is over. Paperwork is incomplete," Vane said smoothly. He smiled, but it did not reach his eyes. "There are certain asset valuations that require updating. We do not expect to proceed until early next week." I looked past him to where Meredith was sliding into the back of a silver sedan. She did not even glance in my direction. "Why is Meredith's lawyer telling me this?" I asked. "Where is Mr. Markham?" "Evan Markham is the executor. Mr. Markham is coordinating with us," Vane said. "We just wanted to ensure you were not inconvenienced. It might be best if you make yourself comfortable in town for a few days." He handed me a card with the logo of Ridge and Spire, LLP, embossed in gold. It felt heavy in my hand. He walked away before I could ask another question, leaving me standing in the rain with a piece of cardstock and a sinking feeling in my gut. They were already moving pieces on a board I could not see. I drove to the Motel 6 on the outskirts of town, the only place I could afford that did not feel suffocating. My father's house, the sprawling estate on the hill, was empty now, but I could not bring myself to stay there, not with Meredith having the keys. That evening, I sat on the edge of the lumpy mattress and replayed the voicemail on my phone for the 10th time. It was the last time I had heard my father's voice. He had called me 2 days before his heart attack. "Sarah," he said. The recording was grainy. "Sarah, please call me when you can. It is regarding the matter we discussed. I need to make sure the arrangement is clear." His voice sounded tight, strained, and oddly formal. We had not discussed any matter. We had barely spoken in 6 months, and our last conversation had been a brief, awkward exchange about the weather. When he said the matter we discussed, he sounded like he was reading a script, or like he was trying to convey a message to someone else who might be listening. I deleted the notification but kept the message. Guilt sat heavy in my chest, a cold stone that made it hard to breathe. I should have called him back immediately. I had let it go to voicemail because I was at work. Managing a crisis at the bistro where I worked as a shift manager, I thought I would call him the next day. I never got the chance. I had moved away 5 years ago after a quiet, terrible rupture in the family. It was not a shouting match. We Coopers did not shout. We froze people out. I had refused to take a job at the firm, refused to marry the son of his business partner, and insisted on painting instead of crunching numbers. The disappointment in his eyes had been worse than anger. So I left. I built a small, messy, real life 3 hours away, and now, listening to his voice, I wondered if I had left him alone with something he could not handle. The next morning, I drove into town to find coffee. Ashford Glen looked exactly the same as it had when I was a teenager. The boutiques on Main Street still sold cashmere sweaters and imported olive oil. The coffee shop was full of women in yoga pants who looked like they had never sweated a day in their lives. I was walking back to my car when a black Range Rover pulled up to the curb, the window rolled down, and Meredith looked out. She wore oversized sunglasses and a scarf that probably cost more than my rent. "Get in." "Sarah," she said. I hesitated. "I have things to do." "Meredith, get in," she repeated. "We need to talk." I opened the door and climbed into the passenger seat. The interior smelled of new leather and expensive perfume. Meredith did not look at me. She kept her hands on the steering wheel, her knuckles white. "I want to offer you a deal," she said. She did not waste time with pleasantries. I did not know we were negotiating. I said, "Don't be naive." She snapped. She turned to face me, taking off her sunglasses. Her eyes were red-rimmed, but her gaze was hard. "Dad's estate is a mess. It is going to take months, maybe years, to untangle the assets. The legal fees will bleed the trust dry. I am willing to save us both the trouble." "What are you talking about?" I asked. "I will write you a check for $200,000, she said. "Personal funds. In exchange, you sign a waiver disclaiming your interest in the estate, and you go back to the city. Today." I stared at her. $200,000 was a life-changing amount of money for me, but the speed of the offer, the intensity in her voice, terrified me. "Why would you do that?" I asked. "We haven't even heard the will." "I am being merciful," Meredith said. "You don't belong here. Sarah, you made that clear when you ran away. You have your little life, your little job. You are barely making rent on that studio apartment on 4th Street. Why drag this out? Take the money, fix your car, pay off your credit cards." The air in the car seemed to vanish. I froze. "How do you know I live on 4th Street?" I asked. Meredith blinked. She looked away, focusing on a pedestrian crossing the street. "I don't know," she said, waving a hand dismissively. "You mentioned it." "I never mentioned it," I said, my voice rising. "I haven't told you my address in 3 years. I have a P.O. box for family mail. How do you know where I live?" "It does not matter," she said, her voice turning sharp. "The point is, you are struggling. I am offering you a way out. You had me followed." I whispered. The realization made me nauseous. "You've been watching me." "Don't be dramatic," Meredith said. She reached into her purse and pulled out a checkbook. "Just think about it. It is a lot of money for someone like you." I opened the door. "Keep your money, Meredith," I said. I stepped out onto the sidewalk, my legs shaking. "And tell your lawyer to stop stalling. I am not leaving until I hear what Dad wanted." I slammed the door and walked away, my heart pounding against my ribs. She knew about my apartment. She knew I was behind on rent. She had been keeping tabs on me, collecting data like I was a liability to be managed. I needed answers. I got in my car and drove to the office of Evan Markham. He had been my father's attorney for 20 years, a quiet man with a penchant for bow ties and fly fishing. His office was in a brick building near the courthouse, smelling of old paper and lemon polish. His secretary tried to tell me he was busy, but I walked past her desk and knocked on his door. "Sarah," Evan said, looking up from a stack of files. He looked older than I remembered. His hair was completely white, and there were deep lines of exhaustion etched around his mouth. He stood up, but he did not come around the desk to hug me. "I need to know what is going on." "Evan," I said, closing the door behind me. "Meredith just tried to buy me off. She offered me cash to leave town before the will reading." Evan sighed. He took off his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. "Sit down." "Sarah," he said. I sat in the leather chair opposite him. It felt like being in the principal's office. "Your sister is aggressive," Evan said carefully, "but the situation is complicated. Why is the paperwork incomplete?" I asked. Dad was meticulous. He had his estate plan down to the last penny. He did. Evan said, but in the last 6 months, he made changes, significant changes, and then there is the matter of the prior agreement. "What prior agreement?" Evan hesitated. He looked at the door, as if checking to make sure it was closed. "There is a document," he said slowly. "A contract your father entered into. It exists outside the scope of the will, but it affects the distribution of the primary assets. Meredith is challenging its validity. That is why the reading is delayed." "What does the contract say?" I asked. "I cannot tell you that yet," Evan said. "Not until the court validates the executor status. But Sarah, you need to be careful. Meredith's team at Ridge and Spire is very good. They are looking for leverage." "Leverage against whom?" I asked. "Against anyone who stands in the way of the estate remaining intact." Evan said. He looked at me with a sad, weary expression. "Your father was a good man, Sarah, but he had secrets, big ones, and now that he is gone, the walls are coming down." I left his office with more questions than answers. Secrets, contracts, surveillance. It felt like I had walked into a trap that had been set years ago. I needed to feel close to him. I needed to remember the father who taught me to ride a bike, not the man who left cryptic voicemails. I drove up the winding road to the family estate. The wrought iron gates were open. Meredith's car was gone. I let myself in with the key I had kept on my ring for 5 years. The house was silent. It smelled of stale air and floor wax. The furniture in the foyer was covered in white sheets, ghostly shapes in the dim light. I walked down the hallway to his study. This was where he had spent his life. The heavy oak door was ajar. I pushed it open and stopped. The room had been stripped. The shelves that had been lined with leather-bound books were bare. The mahogany desk was clear of papers. The Persian rug had been rolled up and shoved into a corner, but it was the wall behind the desk that made me gasp. The large painting that usually hung there had been taken down. Revealing the wall safe, the safe door stood wide open. It was empty. I walked into the room, my footsteps echoing on the hardwood. It felt violated. Someone had not just cleaned this room, they had purged it. I walked to the desk and saw one object left behind. It was a silver picture frame, lying face down on the wood. I picked it up. It was a photo of the 3 of us, Mom, Dad, and me, taken the summer before Meredith went to college. We were laughing, squinting into the sun, but the glass was shattered. A spiderweb of cracks radiated from a single point of impact, right over my face. I ran my thumb over the jagged glass. This was not an accident. The frame had been thrown, or smashed intentionally. It was a message. I set the photo down, my hand trembling. I felt a sudden, sharp clarity. Meredith was not just greedy. She was angry, a deep, corrosive anger that had been festering for years. And she had been here. She had cleaned this room out. I left the house, locking the door behind me. I felt unsafe, exposed. I drove toward the courthouse. If Meredith was playing legal games, I needed to see the board. The clerk at the filing desk looked at me with pity when I gave my name. "Oh, Miss Cooper," she said, "we just processed a service for you. Since we didn't have a local address, it was going to go to the executor, but since you are here..." She handed me a thick envelope. "What is this?" I asked. "It is a petition," she said. "Filed this morning by Ridge and Spire on behalf of Meredith Cooper." I tore the envelope open right there at the counter. My eyes scanned the legal jargon. the dense paragraphs of accusations. Petitioner asserts that the respondent, Sarah Cooper, exercised undue influence over the decedent during his final months. Respondent was financially dependent and utilized emotional manipulation to secure promises of assets. Petitioner seeks to invalidate any codicils executed after January 2024 on the grounds of coercion. The words swam before my eyes. Financially dependent, manipulative, coerced. It was a lie, a total fabrication. I hadn't taken a dime from my father in 5 years. I had barely spoken to him. How could I have coerced him? But as I read, I realized the brilliance of it. By claiming I was estranged, she could paint my sudden return as opportunistic. By claiming I was struggling financially, which she knew because she had stalked me, she provided a motive. I needed a lawyer, not just any lawyer. I needed someone who wasn't afraid of Cooper Hale Industries. I found Tessa Langley's office in a strip mall on the south side of town. Wedged between a dry cleaner and a dentist, she didn't have a marble lobby. She had a waiting room full of mismatched chairs and a receptionist who was also chewing gum. Tessa herself was a woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and hair pulled back in a severe bun. She listened to me without interrupting for 20 minutes. She read the petition, flipping the pages with a quick, rhythmic snap. "She is going for the throat," Tessa said finally, tossing the papers onto her desk. "This isn't just a probate dispute. Sarah, this is a character assassination. Can she win?" I asked. "It is all lies. In probate court. The truth matters less than what you can prove," Tessa said. "And right now, she has the high ground. She has the resources, the momentum, and the narrative. She is the responsible older sister who stayed to run the company. You are the flighty artist who came back for a payday." I felt the anger burn in my throat. "I don't want the money. I just want to protect my father's name. If you want to protect his name, you have to fight," Tessa said. She leaned forward. "Look at this paragraph here. She references a specific transfer of funds you allegedly requested in November. Did you ask for money in November?" "No." I said, "Never. Then she is manufacturing evidence, or she is misinterpreting something real." Tessa said, "But here's the thing that worries me. The specificity. She knows about your rent. She knows about your credit card debt. Meredith's filings suggest someone fed her inside information. Someone has been digging into your life for a long time." "Who?" I asked. "That is what we need to find out," Tessa said. "I will take the case. My retainer is low because, frankly, I enjoy taking swings at Ridge and Spire. But you need to be ready. They will drag every mistake you have ever made into the light. I am ready." I said. I didn't feel ready. I felt sick. I returned to the Motel 6 as the sun went down. The neon sign buzzed overhead, casting a red glow on the wet pavement. I locked the door of my room, threw the deadbolt, and collapsed onto the bed. My head was spinning. The cracked photo, the empty safe, the accusations. It felt like reality was shifting under my feet. I got up to wash my face. When I came out of the bathroom, I saw something white against the dark carpet. An envelope had been slid under the door. My heart hammered against my ribs. I walked over quietly and picked it up. It was a plain white envelope, sealed, with no name on it. I opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper. It was a photocopy of a bank transfer record. The numbers were blurred, but the text was clear. Account, Harbor Shield. Relocation admin. Amount, $50,000. Date, October 12th, 2023. There was a sticky note attached to the photocopy. The handwriting was jagged, hurried. "Ask why your father paid to disappear someone who isn't you." I stared at the paper. Harbor Shield. Relocation. Disappear. The date was 2 years ago. My father had paid $50,000 to something called Harbor Shield. Was it a security firm? A charity? I went to the window and peered through the blinds. The parking lot was empty except for a few pickup trucks. The rain had started again, drumming against the glass. I was not just fighting for an inheritance anymore. I was pulling on a thread that was attached to something much darker than a family feud. Someone had been disappeared, and my father had paid for it. I took the paper and tucked it into my bag, right next to the lawyer's card. I sat in the chair by the window and watched the rain, waiting for the morning, waiting for the next move in a game I did not know how to play. The fluorescent lights of the county probate court hummed with a low, headache-inducing frequency that seemed designed to drain the will out of anyone sitting in the wooden pews. I sat beside Tessa Langley, clutching my handbag so tightly my knuckles had turned white. The room smelled of floor wax and stale anxiety. On the other side of the aisle, Meredith looked like she was attending a coronation rather than a preliminary hearing. She was flanked by 3 attorneys from Ridge and Spire, all of them wearing suits that cost more than my annual salary. Meredith herself was dressed in a dark navy dress that was modest yet immaculately tailored. Her hair pulled back in a severe, elegant chignon. She dabbed at dry eyes with a lace handkerchief, performing grief like it was high theater. "She is good," Tessa whispered to me, keeping her voice low. "Look at the posture. She is projecting vulnerability and strength at the same time. The judge is going to eat it up." I did not answer. I felt small. I felt like the teenage girl who had been told she was too emotional, too messy, too much of a problem to fit into the Cooper family portrait. Judge Harrison entered. A man with a face like a crumpled paper bag and eyes that had seen too many family squabbles. He sat down and shuffled the files in front of him. "Case number 492, regarding the estate of Daniel Cooper," he rumbled. Garrett Vane stood up immediately. His voice was smooth, filling the courtroom with a practiced baritone. "Your Honor, we are here to request an immediate appointment of Meredith Cooper as the sole administrator, pending the resolution of the will's validity. We believe this is necessary to protect the assets of Cooper Hale Industries from potential mismanagement." "Mismanagement?" I whispered, feeling the heat rise in my cheeks. Tessa placed a calming hand on my arm. She stood up. "Objection, Your Honor. My client, Sarah Cooper, is a named beneficiary. There is no evidence that the estate is at risk. We are requesting a standard discovery period to review the assets and the alleged prior agreements mentioned by the executor." Vane turned to look at me. His expression was one of pity, which was far worse than contempt. "Your Honor," he said, lowering his voice to a tone of respectful reluctance, "we hesitate to bring this into the public record, but Miss Sarah Cooper has been estranged from the family for 5 years. She has a history of instability. Her return to Ashford Glen coincides directly with a period of personal financial distress. We are concerned that her involvement is motivated solely by a need for immediate liquidity, which could force a fire sale of sensitive company assets." Instability, the word hung in the air like smoke. He hadn't called me crazy. He hadn't called me a gold digger. He had used a corporate euphemism that sounded reasonable and dangerous. The judge looked at me over his spectacles. I tried to sit up straighter, but I felt the weight of the room crushing me. "I am ordering discovery," Judge Harrison said, banging his gavel lightly. "But I am also granting the motion to subpoena relevant personal records to determine the fitness of the beneficiaries if there is a dispute regarding the executorship." Vane smiled. It was a shark smile. "Thank you, Your Honor," he said. "We have the subpoenas prepared, before we even left the courtroom." A junior associate from Ridge and Spire handed Tessa a thick stack of papers. We walked out into the hallway, the marble echoing with the sound of our footsteps. "What did they ask for?" I asked, my voice trembling. Tessa flipped through the pages, her jaw tightening. "Everything. Sarah, they want your employment records for the last 5 years. They want your landlord references. They want your credit history. And here." She stopped, her finger resting on a line of text. "What?" I asked. "They are subpoenaing your therapy records," she said quietly. "From the clinic you went to after the breakup 3 years ago." I felt the blood drain from my face. I had never told Meredith about that. I had never told anyone in Ashford Glen about the depression I battled after my engagement ended. "How does she know?" I whispered. "How can she possibly know that?" "I told you," Tessa said, her eyes dark. "Someone has been digging. They are trying to paint a picture of you as mentally unfit to handle the estate. They want to prove you are unstable so they can lock you out of the decision-making process. I leaned against the cold plaster wall, trying to breathe. It felt like a violation. My father was dead, and instead of mourning him, I was being dissected. "We have to fight this," Tessa said. "But right now, we need to go on the offensive. We need to find out what Daniel was hiding that makes Meredith so terrified of you looking at the books." I nodded, but my mind was elsewhere. I was thinking about the note under my motel door. Harbor Shield. After leaving the courthouse, I did not go back to the motel. I drove to the address I had looked up earlier. The Briar Run Credit Union was a small, brick building on the edge of town, the kind of place that had not updated its decor since the 1990s. It was far from the gleaming glass towers where Cooper Hale did its banking. Why would my father, a man who moved millions, have an account here? I walked inside. The air conditioning was humming loudly. There was a single teller behind the counter, a woman with graying hair and a name tag that read, Janice. "Can I help you?" "Hun?" she asked, looking up from a crossword puzzle. I cleared my throat. "Yes, my name is Sarah Cooper. I am the daughter of Daniel Cooper." Janice's smile faltered slightly. "Oh, I heard about his passing. I am so sorry. He was a customer here for a long time." I placed the photocopy of the bank transfer on the counter. "I found this among his papers." I lied. "It references a transfer to an account called Harbor Shield. I'm trying to sort out his expenses. I was wondering if you could give me any information on who the recipient is." Janice looked at the paper as her eyes scanned the words Harbor Shield. Her face went completely blank. The friendly demeanor vanished, replaced by a rigid, fearful stillness. She pushed the paper back toward me as if it were hot. "I cannot help you with that," she said. Her voice was tight. "You can't?" I asked. "Or you won't? I just need to know if it is a business or a person." "That account history is archived," she said. "It is restricted. You would need a court order to access those records. And even then..." She stopped. She looked toward the manager's office in the back. The door was closed. She leaned forward, her voice dropping to a whisper. "You should not be asking about that account here." "Miss Cooper, why?" I asked. Janice did not answer. Instead, she reached into the pocket of her cardigan. Her hand moved quickly, sliding a small white card across the counter, hidden under her palm. "Take this," she whispered. "Don't look at it now. Just go." I covered the card with my hand and slid it into my purse. "Janice, please," I said. "Go," she hissed, "before the manager comes out." I turned and walked out of the credit union, my heart pounding. I sat in my car for a long time before I dared to look at the card. It was a plain, heavy cardstock. No logo, no name, just a phone number printed in black ink. I drove to a quiet overlook near the reservoir, away from people. My hands were shaking as I dialed the number. It rang 4 times. I was about to hang up when the line clicked open. There was no greeting, just silence. I could hear breathing on the other end. "Hello?" I said. "I was given this number by a woman at Briar Run Credit Union. My name is Sarah Cooper." The silence stretched for 5 seconds. Then, a man's voice spoke. It was calm, deep, and utterly devoid of emotion. "I know who you are." "Sarah, who is this?" I asked. "What is Harbor Shield?" "You are asking the wrong questions." The voice said, "You are looking for money. You should be looking for the reason the money was moved. My father paid $50,000 to that account." I said, "The note said he paid to disappear someone. He didn't buy silence." The voice said, "He bought time." "What does that mean?" "Time for what?" There was a sharp, static click on the line, a sound that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. It sounded like a connection being bridged, or a recording starting. The voice on the other end changed tone, becoming urgent. "Do not trust the paperwork, Sarah, and do not trust the executor." The line went dead. I stared at the phone. He bought time. Time for whom? For himself? For the person he disappeared? I was still sitting there when my phone buzzed again. It was Tessa, Sarah, where are you? She asked. I am at the reservoir. I said, why? Garrett Vane just called me. She said, they want to meet. Meredith is offering a settlement again. I laughed. A harsh, humorless sound. Of course she is. What is the offer this time? They have raised it, Tessa said, significantly. How much? $1.5 million. Tessa said, tax-free. I nearly dropped the phone. $1.5 million. That was enough to vanish. Enough to buy a house, start a studio, never worry about bills again. Why? I asked. Yesterday she offered $200,000. Why the jump? That is what scares me. Tessa said, you don't offer that kind of money to someone you think you can crush in court. You offer that kind of money when you are terrified of what happens if you don't settle. They are afraid of discovery. Sarah, they are afraid of what we will find if we keep digging. Tell them no. I said, Sarah, think about it. Tessa warned, this is a guaranteed win. If we fight, we could lose everything. Tell them no, I repeated, my voice steady. I don't want the money. I want to know what Harbor Shield is. Harbor what? Tessa asked. I will explain later. I said, just reject the offer. I hung up and started the car. I had another lead to follow. The outline of my father's financial life was beginning to take shape, and one name kept popping up in the few documents I had seen. The North Pine Community Foundation. The foundation's headquarters were located in a renovated historic building downtown. It looked like a library, all dark wood and tasteful lighting. I walked in without an appointment. The receptionist was polite but firm. Doctor, Hart is in meetings all day. I will wait. I said. I waited for 3 hours. Finally, a woman in a beige suit emerged from the back office. She looked like a politician. Perfect hair, perfect smile, eyes that assessed my net worth in a single glance. Miss Cooper, she said, extending a hand, I am Elaine Hart. I was so saddened to hear about your father. He was a pillar of this community. I need to talk to you about his contributions, I said. Ignoring the pleasantries, I understand he made significant donations to this foundation in the last 5 years. Doctor? Hart's smile didn't waver. Daniel was very generous. He cared deeply about community stabilization. I want to see the records of those donations. I said, specifically. Any funds that were earmarked for specific projects, I am afraid that is impossible. Doctor, Hart said smoothly, donor privacy is paramount, even from family members. Unless you are the executor of the estate, we cannot release those files. I am a beneficiary. I said, and I have reason to believe those funds were not just charitable gifts. Doctor. Hart's expression cooled. Everything this foundation does is by the book. Miss Cooper, she said, we are audited annually. If you have concerns, I suggest you take them up with Mr. Markham. Now, if you will excuse me, I have a donor dinner to attend. She turned and walked away. She was lying. I could feel it. The phrase by the book sounded like a rehearsal. I met Tessa at her office late that afternoon. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across her desk. She looked exhausted. I found something, Tessa said as soon as I walked in. She pointed to a document on her desk. It was a photocopy of the will index, the list of documents officially filed with the court clerk. Look at the page numbers, she said. I looked. The index listed the last will and testament, pages 1 through 12. Then there was a gap. The next document was the asset schedule, starting on page 14. Where is page 13? I asked. Exactly, Tessa said. There is a stamp here from the clerk's office indicating that a codicil, an addition to the will, was received and logged. It was assigned page 13, but the actual page is missing from the physical packet. Someone removed it? I asked. After it was stamped, Tessa said. That is a felony. Sarah. Tampering with court documents. What was on that page? We don't know, Tessa said, but if it was a codicil, it likely contained specific instructions that overrode the main text. Maybe it changed the executor. Maybe it changed the distribution. Or maybe it explained the Harbor Shield account. I said, I told her about the bank, the card, and the phone call. Tessa listened, her face growing pale. "Sarah," she said softly, "this is getting dangerous. If your father was paying for someone to disappear, and now the record of that payment is buried, and the part of the will that might explain it is stolen, we are not just dealing with Meredith being greedy. We are dealing with a cover-up. We need to find out what was on that page." I said, "There is only one person who might know." Tessa said, "Your father's assistant, Nina Voss. She drafted all his correspondence. If there was a codicil, she typed it." I found Nina Voss living in a small bungalow on the north side of town. She had been my father's assistant for 30 years. She used to send me birthday cards when I was a kid. When she opened the door, she looked terrifyingly frail. She was wearing a bathrobe. Even though it was 6 in the evening, her eyes were darting back and forth, scanning the street behind me. "Sarah," she whispered, "you shouldn't be here. I need to talk to you." "Nina," I said, "please, it is about the will." She hesitated, then pulled me inside and locked the door quickly. The house was dark. The curtains were drawn. "Did anyone see you?" she asked. "No." I said, "Nina, why are you scared?" She sank onto the sofa, clutching a tissue. "They told me not to talk to you," she said. "Who?" "Mr. Vane and Meredith. They said if I talked to you, I would lose my pension. They said I would be liable for breach of confidentiality." "Nina," I said, sitting beside her, "someone stole a page from the will, a codicil. Did you type a codicil for my father?" Nina began to weep. Her shoulders shook. "I didn't type it," she sobbed. "He wrote it by hand. He didn't trust the computer system anymore. He said IT was monitoring his keystrokes. What did he do with it?" I asked gently. "He put it in an envelope," she said, "a blue envelope. He sealed it with wax, the old-fashioned way. He gave it to me the day before he died. He said, 'Nina, if anything happens to me, you give this to Sarah, only Sarah.'" My heart stopped. "Where is it?" "Nina?" She looked up at me, her face ravaged by guilt. "I failed you. Sarah, I am so sorry. Where is the envelope? Meredith came here." Nina whispered, "The night he died, 2 hours after the ambulance took him away. She came to my door. She knew about the envelope. She demanded it. She said she was the executor, that she had the legal right to all his papers. Did you give it to her? She threatened me. Sarah. She said she knew about my brother's trouble with the law. She said she would make sure he went back to prison if I didn't cooperate. I was so scared. I gave it to her." I closed my eyes. Meredith had stolen the codicil. She had destroyed or hidden my father's final instructions. "Thank you, Nina," I said, standing up. "You have been very brave." "I am not brave," she said bitterly. "I am a coward. But Sarah, be careful. Your father was afraid. In those last weeks, he was terrified. He kept saying, 'The foundation is cracking.' I thought he meant the business, but now, I don't know." I left Nina's house feeling a cold rage settling in my gut. This wasn't just a legal battle, it was a moral war. Meredith had used fear to silence an old woman. She had stolen from the dead. I was hungry, but I didn't want to go back to the motel. I drove to a 24-hour diner on the highway, a place with flickering neon and truckers eating pie at the counter. I ordered coffee and a grilled cheese sandwich. I sat in a booth in the back, staring at my reflection in the dark window. I looked tired. The circles under my eyes were dark bruises. I wondered if Meredith was right. Maybe I was unstable. Maybe I wasn't strong enough for this. "Excuse me." I looked up. A man was standing by my booth. He was in his 50s, wearing worn work boots and a flannel shirt stained with grease. He held a baseball cap in his hands, twisting the brim nervously. "Are you Daniel Cooper's daughter?" he asked. "Sarah?" "Yes," I said, bracing myself for another confrontation. "I just wanted to say, I am sorry about your dad." He said, "Thank you." I said. He shifted his weight. "You don't know me. My name is Frank. I own the hardware store down on Elm." "Okay," I said. 5 years ago." Frank said, looking down at his boots. "I was going under. The bank was calling in my loan. I was going to lose the store. My house, everything. My wife was sick. It was a bad time. He took a breath. Your dad found out. I don't know how, but he came into the store one day. He didn't buy anything. He just asked to see the books. Then he wrote a check, paid off the whole loan. That sounds like him, I said softly. He could be generous. Frank shook his head. It wasn't just generosity. Miss Cooper, when he gave me the check, he looked sad. He told me, "Take it. Frank, I need to put some good into the world to balance the scales." To balance the scales? I repeated. Yeah, Frank said. He did that kind of thing a lot around town, paying off mortgages, covering medical bills for folks, always quiet, always cash or personal checks. It was like he was trying to make up for something big. Frank put his cap back on. Anyway, I just wanted you to know, he was a good man, even if he was haunted. Good luck with the sister. Everyone in town knows she's a shark. He walked away, leaving me with my cold coffee to balance the scales. My father hadn't just been a philanthropist. He had been a man seeking atonement. He had been trying to buy his way into heaven, or at least trying to offset a debt that weighed heavy on his soul. What had he done? What was the sin that required millions of dollars in secret charity to wash away? I thought of the voice on the phone. He bought time. I thought of the missing codicil. I thought of the man in the black suit who was yet to appear, the one mentioned in the hidden files. I took a sip of the bitter coffee. I was done being the victim. Meredith wanted a fight? She was going to get one. I wasn't going to settle for $1.5 million. I wasn't going to settle for anything less than the truth. I pulled out my phone and texted Tessa. File the emergency motion, alleging tampering with estate documents. We are going to war. Outside. The rain had stopped, but the fog was rolling in, thick and white, obscuring the road ahead. I stepped out into the night, ready to find out what lay hidden in the mist. The discovery phase of a lawsuit is supposed to be about the exchange of information, a process designed to level the playing field. In reality, it is a weapon. 2 days after Judge Harrison ordered the files opened, a delivery van backed up to the curb outside Tessa Langley's storefront office. 2 men in jumpsuits unloaded 24 bankers' boxes, stacking them in the small waiting room until they formed a cardboard wall that blocked the sunlight from the front window. They are trying to bury us, Tessa said. Staring at the tower of paper, she picked up a file at random. It was a receipt for landscaping services from 6 years ago. It is called a document dump, she explained, tossing the file back onto the stack. They give us everything. Every invoice, every email, every meaningless scrap of paper from the last decade, hoping we will drown in the noise and miss the signal. They want to exhaust our time and our budget before we find a single smoking gun. We have to go through it, I said, staring at the boxes, all of it. I spent the next week in a windowless conference room at Tessa's office. My hands dry from handling paper, my eyes burning from reading tiny font. It was grueling. But the physical exhaustion was easier to handle than what was happening outside. Meredith had launched a campaign on a second front, the town of Ashford Glen. It started with whispers. I walked into the local grocery store to buy milk, and the conversation in the checkout line died instantly. 2 women I had known since high school turned their backs to me, pretending to study a rack of magazines. I heard one of them whisper the word, greedy. By Wednesday, the whispers had turned into open hostility. A barista at the coffee shop wrote traitor on my cup instead of my name. When I asked him about it, he just shrugged and said it must have been a misunderstanding. But the smirk on his face told a different story. Meredith was leaking information. She was spinning a narrative that I was the unstable, prodigal sister returning to loot the family fortune, suing the grieving sister who had stayed behind to care for our dying father. She never said it publicly. Of course, she let her lawyers and her social circle do the talking. I was being tried in the court of public opinion, and I was losing. I felt the old shame creeping back, that familiar sensation of being the black sheep, the problem child. I found myself checking the locks on my motel door 3 times a night. Then the calls started. They came to my cell phone late at night, always from a blocked number. The first time. I answered, expecting it to be Tessa. Hello? I asked. There was only silence on the other line, not the silence of a dead connection, but the heavy, deliberate silence of someone listening. I could hear the faint sound of breathing, the rustle of fabric. Who is this? I demanded. Click. The next night, it happened again, and the night after that. They were trying to rattle me, to make me feel watched. Don't let them see you sweat. Tessa told me when I explained the calls. We build a counter-narrative, calm, rational. You did not ask for money. You are asking for the truth. We document every call, every snub in town, every intimidating glance. We build a record of harassment. I nodded, but it was hard to stay calm when I felt like the walls were closing in. It was in the middle of the second week of reviewing documents that I found the first crack in the wall. I was sifting through a box labeled Charitable Giving, 2022. It was mostly standard stuff. Donations to the local hospital, the animal shelter, the opera house. But clipped to the back of a tax receipt for the North Pine Community Foundation was a separate ledger sheet. It looked like it had been misfiled. The entry was for a transfer of $75,000. The recipient was listed as Harbor Shield Protective Relocation Initiative. I froze. I had seen the name Harbor Shield on the bank transfer I found under my door, but this was the first time I had seen the full title, Protective Relocation Initiative. Tessa, I called out, look at this. Tessa came over and peered at the document. Protective Relocation. She read slowly. That sounds like witness protection, but look at the administrator, I said, pointing to the line below the recipient. Administered by the Trust of Miller Haynes. That is a law firm in Philadelphia, Tessa said. Frowning? A boutique firm, very expensive, very discreet. If it is administered by a law firm, I said, my mind racing, then it is not a charity, it is a legal arrangement, a trust. And if it is a trust, Tessa said, her eyes lighting up, then there are beneficiaries, and there are rules for disbursement. Daniel was not just giving money away, he was funding a specific operation. We need to know who Miller and Haynes represents. I said, we will add it to the list, Tessa said. But this proves one thing. Sarah, your father wasn't suffering from dementia or being coerced. He was executing a plan that required $75,000 a year to keep someone hidden. The discovery gave us a direction, but I needed context. I needed to understand the mindset of the man who had built this labyrinth. I needed to talk to Franklin Dyer. Franklin had been the lead auditor for Cooper Hale Industries for 20 years before he retired. He was a man who saw the world in columns of debits and credits. I found him living in a retirement community on the south side of the valley, sitting on his porch wrapped in a thick cardigan, watching the birds. Mr. Dyer? I asked, walking up the steps. He squinted at me through thick glasses. Sarah? Sarah Cooper? Yes, sir. He sighed, a long, rattling sound in his chest. I heard you were back. I heard about the trouble. I sat on the white wicker chair opposite him. I need to ask you about my father. Franklin. Not about the business today, but about the past, about the time you retired. Franklin's hands tightened on the arms of his chair. That was a long time ago. Sarah, you left suddenly. I said, you were 2 years away from full pension maturity, but you took an early buyout. Why? Franklin looked out at the lawn. A sprinkler hissed in the distance. Your father was a complicated man, Franklin said softly. He carried the weight of the world on his shoulders. He thought he could fix everything if he just moved the numbers around enough. Fix what? I asked. The implosion? Franklin said. I leaned forward. What implosion? 12 years ago, Franklin said, his voice dropping to a murmur. There was exposure, financial exposure. I never saw the full picture, but I saw the edges of it. There were liabilities that weren't on the books, big ones, tied to some of the international partnerships. If it had come out, it would have destroyed the company. The stock would have gone to zero. And the employees? I asked. The pension fund was heavily invested in company stock. Franklin said, "If the company went down, the pensions would have evaporated. Hundreds of families in this town would have lost their retirement. So what did my father do?" "He fixed it," Franklin said. "He moved assets. He sold off personal property. He took loans against his own equity. He plugged the holes in the dike with his own money. But he was terrified. He was terrified that someone would find out he had been propping it up. That is why I left. I couldn't sign off on the audits anymore because I knew the numbers were engineered. Not for greed. Mind you, for survival." He looked at me, his eyes watery. "He saved everyone, Sarah. But he broke the law to do it. And he lived in fear that one day, the bill would come due." I drove away from the retirement community with a heavy heart. My father wasn't a villain. He was a desperate man trying to save his employees. But that desperation had created a web of secrets that Meredith was now using to strangle me. And if he had broken the law to save the pensions, then Harbor Shield wasn't just about hiding a person, it was about hiding a witness, someone who knew about the engineered numbers. 2 days later, we finally got Meredith in a room. The deposition was held in the conference room at Ridge and Spire. The table was polished mahogany, reflecting the faces of the 5 lawyers sitting around it. A court reporter sat at the end, her fingers hovering over her machine. Meredith sat opposite me. She looked impeccable, not a hair out of place, her makeup subtle but perfect. She refused to make eye contact with me. For the first 2 hours, she was untouchable. Garrett Vane guided her through the questions with the skill of a bomb disposal expert. She answered calmly, concisely, and with a tone of sorrowful reluctance that made her sound like a saint. Yes, Sarah had been estranged. Yes, Daniel had been heartbroken. Yes, there had been concerns about Sarah's lifestyle. I dug my fingernails into my palms under the table, forcing myself to stay silent. Then it was Tessa's turn. Tessa shuffled her papers. She didn't look up. "Mrs. Cooper," Tessa began, "let us talk about the night your father died." Meredith shifted slightly in her chair. "What about it? You stated in the police report that you arrived at the estate at 7:30 in the evening, after receiving a call from his nurse. Is that correct?" "Yes," Meredith said. "And you were with him until he passed at 8:45? "Yes." I held his hand. "It was very moving," Tessa said dryly. "However, we have reviewed the security logs from the gatehouse. Your vehicle did not enter the estate until 7:50. Meredith blinked. Her composure slipped for a fraction of a second. "The clock on the gate system is often slow," Meredith said. "It has always been glitchy." 20 minutes slow?" Tessa asked. "It is possible." Tessa pulled out a photograph. "This is a time-stamped photo from a traffic camera on Route 9, 2 miles from the estate. It shows your car passing at 7:48. You could not have been at the house at 7:30. Meredith's jaw tightened. I was distressed. My father was dying. I may have misjudged the time. "So you arrived at 7:50, Tessa said. "That leaves 55 minutes before he died. Who else was in the house during that time?" "No one," Meredith said quickly. "Just the nurse. But she was in the kitchen preparing his medication. I was alone with him." "Are you sure?" Tessa asked. "No one else? No business associates? No attorneys?" "No one," Meredith snapped. Her voice cracked, loud and harsh in the quiet room. "Why are you obsessing over minutes? My father was dying. I was there to say goodbye." She was breathing hard. The mask had slipped. She was terrified. Tessa looked at her calmly. "We are just trying to establish the timeline, Mrs. Cooper. Because if you arrived at 7:50 and the nurse was in the kitchen, that leaves a window of time where Daniel Cooper was alone, or perhaps not alone." Garrett Vane stood up. "Objection. Harassing the witness. We are taking a break." He ushered Meredith out of the room. As she passed me, she looked down, and for the first time, I saw pure hatred in her eyes. She wasn't grieving. She was cornered. The deposition convinced me of one thing. Something happened in that house in the 20 minutes Meredith lied about, and whatever it was, it involved the missing documents. I needed to get back into the house. Tessa filed a motion for a supervised inspection of personal effects. arguing that I had a right to retrieve sentimental items that had no monetary value. Vane fought it, but the judge granted it, provided a court officer accompanied me. I walked into my childhood home the next day, shadowed by a bailiff who looked bored. The house felt dead. The air was stale. I went straight to the library. It was still stripped bare, the shelves empty. But I wasn't looking for files. I was looking for a memory. When I was 12, I had given my father a copy of Robinson Crusoe for his birthday. It was a rare edition I had found at a flea market. Paying for it with 6 months of allowance, he had loved it. He had told me it was his favorite book because it was about a man who built a world out of nothing. He had a habit of hiding things in books, not money, but mementos. I scanned the few remaining books that Meredith hadn't bothered to pack, mostly old encyclopedias and gardening guides. My heart sank. Had she taken it? Then I saw it, on the bottom shelf, pushed all the way to the back, behind a stack of National Geographics, the faded blue spine of Robinson Crusoe. I pulled it out. It smelled of dust and old paper. I opened it, my hands trembling. The pages fell open to a section that had been hollowed out. My father had turned the book into a hiding place. Inside the hollowed-out square sat a small, silver key. It wasn't a standard house key. It was small, with a complex, double-sided groove pattern. It looked like a key for a high-security padlock. There was no note, just the key. I closed the book and slipped the key into my pocket. "Is that a sentimental item?" the bailiff asked, glancing at the book. "Yes," I said, my voice steady. "It is my favorite story." I took the book with me, but the key burned a hole in my pocket. It didn't fit the wall safe. That had a digital keypad and a barrel key. This was something else. I went back to the document dump. I searched for anything related to keys, locks, or storage. It took me 4 hours. But I found it, a credit card statement from 3 years ago, under a DBA name my father used for consulting, DC, Strategic. There was a recurring monthly charge of $140 to Iron Lock Storage, Unit 402. I felt a surge of adrenaline. Iron Lock was a facility on the industrial side of town. I drove there immediately. It was a bleak place. Rows of orange metal doors surrounded by a chain-link fence topped with razor wire. I went to the front office. The manager, a guy with grease under his fingernails, looked up my father's DBA name. "I have the key," I said, holding up the silver key I had found. "I am the executor's representative." He didn't look closely at the paperwork. He just saw the key and shrugged. "Unit 402 is on the second row." I walked down the concrete aisle, the wind rattling the metal doors. I found 402. The padlock on the door was a heavy-duty model, the kind that resisted bolt cutters. I slid the silver key into the lock. It turned with a satisfying click. I pulled the hasp open and rolled up the metal door. The unit was small, smelling of dry dust. Inside, there were no piles of furniture, no old clothes. There were just 3 cardboard boxes sitting on a metal shelving unit. They were labeled in thick black marker. Foundation, AHS, 2012 M. Trust. My breath hitched. AHS, Ashford High School? No, Harbor Shield. And 2012, the year Franklin Dyer said the implosion almost happened. I opened the box labeled HS, 2012. It was full of manila folders, but on top lay a black leather-bound journal. I picked it up. I recognized my father's handwriting on the first page. It was a diary of the crisis. I flipped through it, reading fragments of sentences. "Michael wants to go public. I told him it would ruin us. The auditors are asking questions. Franklin knows. We have to move the debt. It is the only way." I turned to the back of the journal. The last 20 pages had been cut out. Someone had taken a razor blade and sliced them cleanly near the binding. I stared at the jagged edges of the paper. The end of the story was missing. But then I saw it. One single page, stuck to the back cover, had been missed. It wasn't part of the chronological entries. It was a note, written in shaky handwriting. the handwriting of an old, sick man. If anything happens, Meredith will try to win by making Sarah look like the problem. She is not. She is the only one who can carry this. I read the line 3 times. Tears pricked my eyes. He knew. He had anticipated exactly what Meredith would do. He had hidden this here for me to find. He didn't think I was unstable. He thought I was strong. I grabbed the boxes. All of them. I wasn't leaving them here. I drove straight to Tessa's office. I burst in, carrying the first box. "We have it," I said. "We have the motive. We have the history." Tessa looked at the journal, at the note, at the files labeled M.H. Trust. "This is it," she said. Her voice hushed. "This connects the foundation, the trust, and the cover-up." We filed an emergency motion that afternoon. Motion to preserve evidence and suspend executorship, pending investigation of fraud. We attached the affidavit from Franklin Dyer, which Tessa had convinced him to sign. The discrepancy in Meredith's timeline and the existence of the hidden storage unit that had not been disclosed in the asset schedule. We served the papers to Ridge and Spire at 5 o'clock. Garrett Vane came out to the lobby to accept them. He didn't look polished this time. He looked annoyed. He flipped through the motion, his eyes scanning the allegations. He looked up at me. A smirk played on his lips, cold and condescending. "You think you have found a smoking gun?" "Sarah," he said softly, "but all you have found is a tragedy. Your father was a disturbed man. This," he waved the papers, "this is just the ramblings of a man trying to justify his mistakes. We will let the judge decide that." I said. Vane stepped closer. He lowered his voice so the receptionist couldn't hear. "You are playing a dangerous game. You are threatening the legacy of this entire town. People depend on Cooper Hale. If you destroy the company to spite your sister, you will be the villain of this story forever. I am not trying to destroy the company." I said, "I am trying to save the truth." Vane chuckled darkly. "You poor girl," he whispered. "You still don't know who you are really up against." He turned and walked back into his office, the heavy glass door clicking shut behind him. I stood in the lobby, the box of evidence heavy in my arms. I knew he was threatening me. I knew the fight was about to get much, much uglier, but for the first time since I arrived in Ashford Glen. I didn't feel like a victim. I had the key. I had the journal, and I knew that my father had chosen me. The courtroom air was stagnant, recycled through vents that had not been cleaned since the Reagan administration. I sat at the plaintiff's table, my hands clasped so tightly that my fingernails were leaving crescent moons in my palms. Beside me, Tessa Langley was arranging her pens with the precision of a surgeon preparing for an incision. Judge Harrison entered, his robes billowing like a storm cloud. He did not look at the gallery. He looked straight at the clerk of the court, a woman named Mrs. Higgins who had worked in this building for 40 years. She looked terrified. "We are on the record," Judge Harrison rumbled. "Mrs. Higgins, please state your findings regarding the will packet for the estate of Daniel Cooper." Mrs. Higgins stood up. Her voice trembled. "Your Honor, upon forensic examination of the binding and the page count, it has been determined that page 13, the document stamped as Codicil A, was indeed present at the time of initial filing. And now?" the judge asked. "It is gone, Your Honor. The staple holes indicate the packet was disassembled and reassembled. The page was removed after the official clerk's seal was applied." A murmur ran through the courtroom. This was not just a clerical error. This was a felony. It meant someone had accessed the secure files inside the courthouse and purged a legal document. Judge Harrison turned his gaze to the defense table. Meredith sat there, her face a mask of polite confusion. Garrett Vane, her attorney, did not even blink. "Mr. Vane," the judge said, his voice dangerously low, "do you have an explanation for how a document disappears from a sealed court file?" "We are as shocked as you are, Your Honor," Vane said smoothly. "We would welcome a full investigation, perhaps a clerical error in the logging system." "It was not a logging error," the judge snapped. "It was theft. I am ordering a full internal review of court security logs. And let me be clear, If I find that any party in this room is connected to the removal of that page, I will not just sanction them. I will refer them for criminal prosecution." Meredith shifted in her seat. For a second, just a second, I saw her throat swallow hard, but Vane was already pivoting. He stood up, buttoning his jacket. "We understand the gravity of the situation, Your Honor. However, while the court investigates its own security failures, we have a more pressing matter regarding the safety of the witnesses in this case." I felt Tessa stiffen beside me. "What matter?" the judge asked. Vane picked up a folder. "We are filing a motion for a temporary restraining order against the plaintiff, Sarah Cooper." The room went silent. I felt the blood drain from my face. "On what grounds?" Tessa demanded, jumping to her feet. "On the grounds of witness intimidation and harassment," Vane said. He walked to the bench and handed over a stack of papers. "Miss Cooper has been aggressively pursuing individuals connected to the estate. She cornered an elderly woman, Nina Voss, in her home late at night, reducing her to tears. She has been stalking former employees. We have screenshots here of text messages sent to foundation staff that are frankly unhinged." He turned and looked at me, his expression mournful. "We believe Miss Cooper is spiraling, Your Honor. Her behavior is becoming erratic and dangerous. We are asking that she be barred from contacting any potential witnesses or approaching within 500 feet of my client." "That is a lie," I said. The words were out of my mouth before I could stop them. "Sarah, sit down," Tessa hissed. Judge Harrison looked at the papers Vane had handed him. He flipped through them. "These text messages," the judge said. "They are fragments. Where is the context?" "We are retrieving the full logs," Vane said, "but the tone is undeniable." I looked at the screen Vane had projected for the court. It was a screenshot of a text I had sent to Elaine Hart's secretary. "I know what you are hiding. I am not going to stop until I find the truth." Taken alone, in bold black and white. It looked manic. It looked threatening. It did not show the 3 unreturned calls that preceded it, or the polite requests for a meeting that had been ignored. I felt the eyes of the town on me. The gallery was full. I saw the faces of people I had gone to high school with, people who read the local paper, people who listened to the gossip at the diner. They were looking at me with a mixture of pity and fear. "There she is," their eyes said. "The crazy sister. The one who came back for the money and lost her mind." It was a humiliation so deep it felt like a physical blow. Meredith was not just fighting me legally. She was dismantling my identity. Judge Harrison lowered the papers. He took off his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. "Mr. Vane," he said wearily, "the court takes allegations of harassment seriously. However, investigating an estate is not harassment. Visiting a witness is not a crime unless there is a threat of violence. But the tone, Your Honor," Vane began, "is aggressive." The judge interrupted. "But given that a page of the will has been stolen, I would say the plaintiff has a right to be aggressive. The motion for a restraining order is denied." Vane sat down. He did not look disappointed. He looked satisfied. He knew exactly what he had done. He hadn't needed the order to be granted. He just needed to say the words unstable and harassment in open court. He needed to plant the seed. As we packed up our bags, I felt a wave of nausea. "They are winning," I whispered to Tessa. "Even when they lose, they are winning." "We are not done yet," Tessa said, her jaw set. "Get your coat. We are going to see Elaine Hart, and this time, we are not asking." The North Pine Community Foundation occupied a renovated townhouse on the edge of the historic district. It smelled of old money, leather, mahogany, and the faint, sweet scent of beeswax. We did not make an appointment. We walked past the receptionist, who tried to stand in our way, and pushed open the double doors to the director's office. Doctor. Elaine Hart was sitting behind a desk that looked like it belonged in a museum. She was a woman of indeterminate age, with hair the color of champagne and a suit that cost more than my car. She looked up, her pen hovering over a document. "Miss Cooper," she said. Her voice was ice water. "I was just informed about your outburst in court. Do I need to call security? I am not here to harass you. Doctor." Hart, I said, walking to the chair opposite her and sitting down. I am here to ask you about the credit union crisis. Elaine Hart froze. The pen lowered slowly to the desk. I have no idea what you're talking about, she said. My father's journal says otherwise. I said. I bluffed. I didn't have the full story yet. Only fragments from the box in the storage unit and Franklin Dyer's hints. But I needed to shake her. He wrote about the stabilization fund. I continued. He wrote about the money he funneled through this foundation to cover up the losses at the credit union 12 years ago. He called it a community rescue. I call it money laundering. Elaine's face went pale beneath her makeup. She stood up and walked to the window. Looking out at the gray street, it was not laundering. She said quietly, it was survival. Explain it, Tessa said. Elaine turned around. Her poise was cracking. Do you have any idea what would have happened? She asked. Her voice was tight. The Briar Run Credit Union was over-leveraged. They had made bad loans to developers who went bust in 2012. If they had failed, half the families in Ashford Glen would have lost their savings. The panic would have spread. It would have triggered a run on the regional banks. So my father bailed them out? I asked. He organized a capital injection. Elaine said. He used the foundation to channel funds from Cooper Hale into the credit union's reserves. He saved this town. Sarah. And Harbor Shield? I asked. Where does that fit in? Elaine's eyes shifted away. She looked at the door. I cannot discuss Harbor Shield. Why not? I demanded. My father paid $75,000 a year to it. That is not a capital injection. That is a salary. Or a payoff. Elaine walked back to her desk and sat down. She folded her hands. They were trembling slightly. Your father made strict arrangements regarding confidentiality. I am bound by them. My father is dead. I said, and his will has been tampered with. If you are protecting a crime. Doctor? Hart, you are an accessory. I am protecting a life. She snapped. The room went silent. Elaine looked shocked that she had spoken so loudly. She took a breath, smoothing her skirt. Please leave, she said. I have said too much. We walked out into the cold afternoon air. My head was spinning. I am protecting a life. It wasn't just about money. It was a person. Tessa pulled out her phone as we walked to the car. I am looking up the board of directors for the North Pine Foundation. She said, if Daniel was funneling money through them, he needed allies on the inside. She scrolled, then stopped walking. Sarah, look at this. I looked at the screen. It was a list of the advisory board members for the current fiscal year. Dr. Elaine Hart, Executive Director, Mr. Samuel Ridge, Legal Counsel, Mrs. Meredith Cooper Hale, Philanthropic Chair. Meredith is on the board. I said, she has been on the board for 3 years. Tessa said, that means she has access to the donor lists. She has access to the restricted fund accounts. She knows. I whispered. She knows about Harbor Shield. That is why she is terrified. It is not just about the inheritance. If this comes out, she is implicated in whatever Daniel was doing. She is legally exposed. Conflict of interest doesn't even begin to cover it, Tessa said grimly. She is suing you to control the estate. While sitting on the board of the very entity the estate was used to manipulate, her wealth isn't independent. Sarah, it is tied to this same dark ecosystem. We need a name, I said. We need to know who Harbor Shield is protecting. There is one name we keep hearing. Tessa said, the business partner, the one who vanished, Michael Rusk. We went back to the office and started digging. Michael Rusk had been the CFO of Cooper Hale 12 years ago. According to the official company history, he had resigned to pursue personal interests in Europe, but according to the archives of the local newspaper, which Tessa accessed through a library database, the story was different. There were rumors of an investigation, a whistleblower complaint filed with the SEC that was mysteriously withdrawn, and then silence. I searched for a death certificate. There was none. I searched for property records. Nothing after 2012. He didn't die. I said, he was erased. Town folklore says he ran off with a mistress and a bag of cash. Tessa said, but if your father was paying $75,000 a year to a protective relocation trust, Then Michael Rusk is the whistleblower. I finished. My father didn't fire him. He hid him. He paid him to stay dead so he wouldn't testify about the credit union bailout. It made sense. It explained the guilt. It explained the payments. It explained the fear. I needed to hear my father's voice. I needed to know if he had regretted it. I had the box from the storage unit in the trunk of my car. I brought it into my motel room that night. Inside, buried under the files, was an old iPhone. An iPhone 6 with a cracked screen. It must have been his burner phone, the one he used for the business he kept off the books. I found a charging cable at the gas station down the road. I plugged it in and waited. The Apple logo appeared, glowing in the dark room. It wasn't passcoded. I went to the voicemail tab. There were dozens of messages, mostly mundane, but at the very bottom, in the deleted messages folder, there was one file that hadn't been fully scrubbed. It was dated 2 days before he died. I pressed play. The voice was distorted, low and rough, as if the speaker was using a voice changer or calling from a bad connection. Daniel, it's me. I know you are sick. I know you are trying to set things right, but you need to know, she is making moves. Meredith, she has been asking questions about the trust. They will bury the truth under the foundation. Daniel, don't let them. If she finds me, the deal is off. I will burn it all down. The message ended. I sat on the edge of the bed, the phone cold in my hand. It's me. It had to be Michael Rusk. He was alive, and he had warned my father about Meredith. If she finds me, the deal is off. That was the leverage. If Meredith found Rusk, she could stop the payments, or worse. But if Rusk came forward, he could destroy the company and everyone involved, including Meredith. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Tessa. Court hearing is confirmed for tomorrow. Vane is trying to block the forensic report introduction. Get some sleep. I didn't sleep. I lay awake, listening to the wind rattle the motel window. I felt like I was losing my grip on reality. Was I the villain? Was I dragging my family's name through the mud for nothing? The next morning, the courthouse was besieged by reporters. The story of the missing will page had leaked. A scandal involving the wealthy Cooper family was catnip for the local press. I fought my way through the cameras. Keeping my head down, I felt a hand grab my arm. I spun around. It was Meredith. She pulled me into the alcove behind the vending machines, away from the prying eyes of the lobby. "Stop this, Sarah," she hissed. Her face was pale, her eyes wide and bloodshot. She looked like she hadn't slept in days either. "Stop what?" I asked, pulling my arm away. "Stop telling the truth? You don't know what you're doing," she said. Her voice shook. It wasn't the commanding tone of the courtroom. It was fear. Pure, unadulterated fear. You are going to destroy everything Dad built. The foundation, the company. It will all collapse. Then maybe it should collapse, I said. If it is built on fraud. "Please," she whispered. Tears welled up in her eyes. "Sarah, please, I will give you 3 million, 5 million. Just sign the settlement. Walk away. We can say it was a misunderstanding. Please, I cannot go to prison. Sarah." She grabbed my hand. Her fingers were ice cold. For a moment, I saw the sister I used to know. The girl who was afraid of thunderstorms. The girl who used to sneak into my bed when our parents fought. Meredith. I started. Then the door to the hallway opened. A court clerk walked past, carrying a stack of files. He glanced at us. In an instant, Meredith changed. She dropped my hand as if it were burning. Her back straightened. The tears vanished, replaced by a sneer of absolute contempt. "You are pathetic," she said, her voice loud enough for the clerk to hear. "Always begging for more. You will not get another dime from this family." She pushed past me and stormed out of the alcove, leaving me stunned. The switch was so fast, so complete. It was terrifying. It was a performance. Everything was a performance. I walked into the courtroom feeling hollow. I sat beside Tessa, my hands shaking. "I can't do this," I whispered to her. "What?" Tessa asked, leaning in. "I can't do this. She is right. I am destroying the family. Everyone hates me. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Maybe I should just take the money. Tessa grabbed my wrist. Her grip was hard. Listen to me, Sarah. That is exactly what they want you to feel. That is the strategy. Gaslighting, isolation, exhaustion. They want you to doubt your own memory. They want you to think you are the crazy one so you will stop looking at the facts. But she is my sister, I said, my voice cracking. She is not your sister right now, Tessa said fiercely. She is an adversary who just tried to file a restraining order against you. She is a woman who stole a page from a dead man's will. I'm afraid. I confessed. I'm afraid that to beat her, I have to become her. I have to be cold. I have to be ruthless. I don't want to be that person. Tessa looked me in the eye. Ruthless isn't the same as precise. Sarah, Meredith is ruthless because she doesn't care who gets hurt as long as she wins. You are being precise because you care about the truth. There is a difference. Don't let her take your humanity, but don't you dare let her take your justice. I took a deep breath. Ruthless isn't the same as precise. I looked across the aisle. Meredith was whispering to Vane, looking composed, looking perfect. The mask was back on. I adjusted my collar. I opened my file. I was ready. Judge Harrison banged his gavel. We are back on the record, he said. We were discussing the matter of the missing codicil. However, before we proceed, I have a new filing to address. He picked up a document that had just been handed to him by the bailiff. He frowned, reading it over. The court has received a notice of appearance, the judge said. Vane stood up. From whom? Your Honor? We have not been notified of any new counsel. It is not a new counsel for the defense, the judge said. It is an intervention. Intervention? Vane asked. By whom? A third party with a potential interest in the estate. The judge said. He looked over his glasses at the courtroom. The filing is on behalf of an entity known as Blackwell Fiduciary Services. I saw Meredith freeze. Her entire body went rigid. Vane looked confused. Blackwell? Vane asked. I have never heard of them. What is their standing? They claim to be the trustee of a conditional instrument executed by Daniel Cooper in 2012. The judge said, and they are asserting that the conditions for activation have been met. Activation of what? Tessa whispered to me. I don't know. I whispered back, but Meredith knows. Look at her. Meredith had gone the color of ash. She was gripping the table so hard her knuckles were blue. She looked like she had seen a ghost. The filing indicates that a representative is present in the building, the judge said. The heavy double doors at the back of the courtroom groaned. Every head turned. The bailiff stood up. Your Honor, the bailiff announced, the representative is requesting permission to enter. Grant it, the judge said. The doors swung open. A silence fell over the room. It was absolute, the kind of silence that happens before a lightning strike. I watched the open doorway, my heart hammering against my ribs. The man in the black suit had arrived, and the game was about to change forever. The courtroom was packed so tightly that the air felt solid, a heavy, suffocating blanket woven from wool suits, damp raincoats, and the collective breath of 200 people. I sat at the plaintiff's table, my spine pressed against the hard wood of the chair, watching the gallery fill. They had come for the spectacle. The fall of the House of Cooper was the best show Ashford Glen had seen in a generation, and nobody wanted to miss the second act. Meredith arrived 5 minutes late. When the double doors swung open to admit her, the room went silent. She looked like a ghost of the woman who had tried to buy me off in her car a week ago. Her skin was the color of parchment, translucent and sickly, and her eyes were rimmed with red. Despite the heavy concealer, she did not walk with her usual gliding confidence. She marched, her movements brittle, as if one wrong step would shatter her into 1,000 pieces. Garrett Vane was at her elbow, whispering urgently into her ear. He looked less like a lawyer and more like a handler trying to keep a wild animal from bolting. Meredith was not listening to him. Her eyes were darting around the room, scanning the faces in the gallery, scanning the judge's bench, scanning the empty space where a witness might stand. She looked terrified. I felt a cold prickle of intuition at the base of my neck. This was not just fear of losing money. Meredith looked like someone who was waiting for an executioner. Tessa Langley leaned toward me. Her voice was low, barely a murmur under the hum of the crowd. "Look at her hands," Tessa said. I looked. Meredith was gripping her expensive leather handbag so tightly that her knuckles were white knobs. She was trembling, a fine, continuous tremor that traveled up her arms to her rigid shoulders. "She knows about the filing," I whispered. "She knows about the third party. She knows something," Tessa said grimly. "But we cannot get distracted. We have to put the evidence on the record before the circus starts. Are you ready?" "I am ready," I said. I wasn't. My stomach was a knot of acid. But I had the key in my pocket and the truth in my throat, and I had to believe that was enough. Judge Harrison entered the courtroom with the energy of a man who had lost his patience days ago. He did not bang the gavel. He simply sat down, arranged his robes, and glared at the defense table. "We are here for an evidentiary hearing regarding the motion to preserve assets and the allegations of document tampering," Judge Harrison said. His voice boomed without a microphone. "Let the record show that the court takes a very dim view of missing evidence. Ms. Langley, you may proceed." Tessa stood up. She moved with a calm, predatory grace. She walked to the clerk's desk and picked up the evidence bag containing the forensic report on the will packet. "Your Honor," Tessa began, her voice clear and ringing, "we are not here to discuss family squabbles. We are here to discuss a felony. The court's own clerk has testified that page 13 of the decedent's will, a codicil stamped and logged by this very court, was physically removed from the packet after filing." She turned to face the gallery, holding the bag up. "This is not a clerical error. This is surgery. Someone with access, someone with motivation, and someone with fear removed Daniel Cooper's final instructions. And we submit that the only person with that combination of means and motive is the person who currently holds the keys to the estate." "Objection," Vane shouted, jumping up. "This is pure speculation. There is no proof my client ever touched that file." The judge leaned forward. "Overruled," Judge Harrison snapped. "The file was in the custody of the executor's office for 3 days before the final seal. Your client is the acting executor if the chain of custody broke. Mr. Vane, it broke on her watch." Vane sat down, his face flushing a deep, angry red. He leaned over and hissed something to Meredith. She did not react. She was staring at the table, her eyes unfocused. Tessa continued, "Relentless. We have established that the document is missing. Now we must establish why. The defense has spent weeks painting Sarah Cooper as unstable, as a prodigal daughter returning for a payout. But the evidence we are entering today tells a different story. It tells the story of a woman who was methodically erased from her father's life, and a sister who is desperate to keep her erased." Vane stood up again, buttoning his jacket. He decided to change tactics. He wasn't going to defend Meredith. He was going to attack me. "Your Honor," he said, adopting a tone of weary sadness. "Ms. Langley tells a compelling fiction. But let us look at the source. The plaintiff, Sarah Cooper, has a documented history of emotional volatility. We have subpoenaed records that show a pattern of paranoia and distress." He picked up a piece of paper. "We have a statement here from a former landlord in Philadelphia, describing Ms. Cooper as reclusive and prone to outbursts. We have the text messages sent to the foundation, demanding meetings at all hours. We are looking at a woman who is cracking under the pressure of her own guilt. Your Honor, she is projecting her instability onto a grieving family. I felt the heat rise in my cheeks. It was the same old song. Sarah is crazy. Sarah is a mess." I looked across the aisle at Meredith. She was finally looking at me. Her expression wasn't one of triumph. It was a strange, blank stare, like a doll with glass eyes. Then, she reached into her large black tote bag to pull out a tissue. As the bag fell open, I saw it. It was wedged between a wallet and a tablet case, a thick, hard-bound book with a faded burgundy spine and gold lettering that had mostly rubbed off. My breath caught in my throat. I knew that book. It was The Count of Monte Cristo. Not just any copy. It was the edition my father had kept on his bedside table for 20 years. He read a chapter of it every night. He used to say it was the only book that understood patience. When I had visited the house with the bailiff, the bedside table had been empty. Meredith had sworn under oath that she had packed nothing from that room, that it had been cleared by the cleaning staff months ago. But there it was, in her bag. She had raided the house. She had gone through his private things recently, likely in a panic, looking for whatever he had hidden. Ms. Cooper? Tessa touched my arm. Sarah? I stood up. I didn't mean to. My legs just moved. She has it, I said. My voice was loud, cutting through Vane's monologue. Judge Harrison looked at me. Ms. Cooper, you will speak through your attorney. She has the book, I said, pointing a trembling finger at Meredith. The burgundy book in her bag, The Count of Monte Cristo. She swore she never touched his nightstand. She swore the room was empty when she got there, but she has it right now. Meredith flinched, clutching the bag to her chest. Vane looked confused. Your Honor, this is exactly the kind of outburst. Open the bag, I challenged. If I am crazy, open the bag. Prove me wrong. Meredith looked at Vane. Her eyes were wide with panic. She shook her head minutely. Judge Harrison wasn't looking at Vane. He was looking at Meredith's reaction. Mr. Vane, the judge said softly, if your client has removed items from the estate that were not catalogued, that is a violation of the temporary restraining order on assets. Ask her to open the bag. Vane looked at Meredith. He saw the truth in her face. He closed his eyes for a second, a flicker of defeat crossing his features. We decline to indulge this theatrical, Vane stammered. The judge's gavel came down with a crack that sounded like a gunshot. You will indulge it, Mr. Vane, or I will hold you in contempt. Bailiff, inspect the bag. The bailiff walked over. Meredith sat frozen, clutching the leather straps. For a second, I thought she was going to fight him. Then, she let go. She slumped back in her chair, defeated. The bailiff reached in and pulled out the book. He held it up, a faded burgundy hardback. Exhibit C, the judge said, his voice cold. Entered into the record. It appears the plaintiff's paranoia is remarkably accurate. Tessa squeezed my hand under the table. Good job, she whispered. Now, call your witness. The judge ordered. I took the stand. I felt the eyes of the town on me. But the shame was gone. I felt a cold, hard clarity. Tessa walked me through the discovery of the key, the visit to the storage unit, the boxes. Tell the court what you found in the box labeled AHS 2012, Tessa said. I found a journal. I said into the microphone, my father's journal from 12 years ago. And what was the condition of this journal? The last 20 pages were cut out. I said, someone had used a razor blade. The edges were clean. They removed the entries from October to December of 2012. And was anything left? One page. I said, a loose page stuck to the back cover. Read it, please. I unfolded the photocopy we had entered into evidence. My voice shook slightly as I read my father's words. If anything happens, Meredith will try to win by making Sarah look like the problem. She is not. She is the only one who can carry this. I looked up. Meredith was staring at her hands. She wasn't crying anymore. She looked hollowed out. He knew. I said to the courtroom, he knew she would do this. He knew she would attack me to hide the truth. Tessa let the silence hang in the air for a long moment. No further questions. Vane declined to cross-examine me. He knew better. He knew that any question he asked would only give me a chance to say more. Call Dr. Elaine Hart, Tessa said. Elaine Hart walked to the stand. She looked like she was walking to the gallows. Her perfect suit was wrinkled, and her face was drawn. She was sworn in. Dr. Hart, Tessa began. You are the director of the North Pine Community Foundation. Is that correct? Yes, Elaine said. Her voice was brittle. And in that capacity, you accepted donations from Daniel Cooper? Yes. Did any of those donations come with conditions? Elaine hesitated. She looked at Vane, then at Meredith. Neither of them could help her now. "Yes," she whispered. "Speak up, please," the judge said. "Yes," Elaine said. Louder. "We received restricted gifts." "And what were the restrictions?" Tessa asked. "Confidentiality," Elaine said. "Absolute anonymity regarding the ultimate beneficiaries of the grants. Is it true that for the last 12 years, the Foundation has paid an annual sum of $75,000 to an entity known as Harbor Shield?" Vane stood up. "Objection. This goes beyond the scope of the probate hearing. The internal finances of the Foundation are not on trial." The judge looked at him. "Mr. Vane, if the money came from the estate, it is absolutely on trial. Overruled. Answer the question." "Dr. Hart?" Elaine closed her eyes. "Yes," she said. "We facilitated the payments." "And what is Harbor Shield?" Tessa asked. "Is it a charity? A shelter?" Elaine took a deep breath. She looked at me. There was an apology in her eyes, and a warning. "It is a protective trust," she said, "administered by a law firm in Philadelphia. It was set up to provide security." "Security for whom?" Tessa pressed. "For a whistleblower," Elaine said. The words came out in a rush. "Daniel told me that if this person wasn't protected, if they weren't kept safe and silent, everything he built would be destroyed. He wasn't paying for silence. Ms. Langley, he was paying for a life. He told me that if the payments stopped, the truth would come out, and it would burn Cooper Hale to the ground." The courtroom erupted. Reporters were typing furiously on their phones. The gallery was buzzing. Judge Harrison banged his gavel. "Order! Order in this court!" He turned to Elaine. "You are telling me," the judge said, his voice shaking with suppressed anger, "that a charitable foundation was used to funnel hush money to a witness in a corporate cover-up? I am telling you that Daniel Cooper was a desperate man," Elaine said, her voice breaking, "and he made us all desperate with him." She stepped down from the stand. The damage was done. The polite facade of the Cooper family was shattered, but we weren't finished. The side door of the courtroom opened, and the court clerk, Mrs. Higgins, hurried in. She looked flustered. She was carrying a thick yellow envelope with a red wax seal that had been broken. "Your Honor," Mrs. Higgins said, approaching the bench, "I apologize for the interruption, but a filing has just been processed from the archival vault. It was flagged by the system when the testimony regarding the year 2012 began." "What is it?" the judge asked. Taking the envelope, he pulled out a document. It was old. The paper was slightly yellowed. "This is a sealed amendment," the judge said. Reading the cover page, labeled "Conditional Bequest." It is dated November 4th, 2012. He looked up, his eyes scanning the courtroom. "The timestamp on this document precedes the current will by 8 years. The judge said, "However, there is a clause here. A trigger clause." He adjusted his glasses, reading aloud. "In the event that the legitimacy of the estate is challenged, or if evidence of tampering is presented to a court of law, this amendment shall supersede all prior and subsequent wills regarding the distribution of the primary trust." A gasp went through the room. "Legal backdoor." Tessa whispered to me. "He set a trap. If they played fair, the normal will stood. If they cheated, this one triggered." The judge looked at Meredith. "Mrs. Cooper, were you aware of this amendment?" Meredith was shaking her head. Her lips were moving. "You can't," she whispered. It was a whisper, but in the silent courtroom, it carried like a scream. "You can't," she said again, louder. He promised it would stay buried." She wasn't talking to the judge. She was talking to the empty air, or to the ghost of our father. The judge ignored her. "The document is sealed," Judge Harrison said. "However, given the testimony we have just heard and the activation of the trigger clause, I am ordering it opened, unless there is a legal basis to keep it sealed." Meredith stood up. Her chair scraped loudly against the floor. "No," she cried out. "You don't understand. If you open that, you kill us all." "Sit down, Mrs. Cooper," the judge barked. "It is not just money," Meredith screamed. She was losing control completely. The mask was gone. Her face was twisted in a rictus of terror. "It is him. If you trigger the amendment, you bring him back." "Him? Who is him?" My phone buzzed on the table. It was a single vibration. Sharp, urgent. I looked down. The screen was glowing. It was a text message from a number I did not know. No area code, just a string of digits. "When he enters, do not speak first. Let him say your father's name." My stomach dropped. The floor seemed to tilt beneath my feet. "When he enters," someone was here. Someone was watching this hearing in real time. Someone knew exactly what was about to happen. I looked around the gallery. 200 faces, strangers, neighbors, reporters. Which one was the messenger? The judge was holding the document, preparing to break the inner seal. "I find no legal basis to maintain the seal." Judge Harrison stated, "I am opening the amendment." He ripped the envelope. The sound of tearing paper echoed in the hush. At that exact moment, the heavy oak doors at the back of the courtroom groaned. They didn't just open, they were pushed open with a slow, deliberate weight. Every head in the room turned. The court reporter stopped typing. Meredith froze, her hand halfway to her mouth, her eyes fixed on the entrance with a look of absolute horror. The bailiff standing by the door straightened up. He looked at the paperwork in his hand, then at the figure standing in the threshold. He cleared his throat. His voice wavered slightly. "Announcing the arrival of a representative for an interested party." The bailiff called out, "Representing Blackwell Fiduciary Services." A man stepped inside. He was tall, dressed in a black suit that was cut with a precision that made the other lawyers in the room look sloppy. He carried a slim leather attaché case. He did not look at the gallery. He did not look at the judge. He looked straight at me. His face was hard, angular, and unreadable. He had the eyes of a man who had spent a long time in the dark. He walked down the center aisle. The crowd parted for him, leaning away as if he generated a physical force field. The only sound was the rhythmic click of his shoes on the marble floor. Click, click, click. He stopped at the gate that separated the gallery from the court. He pushed it open and stepped into the well. Meredith let out a low, strangled sob. She collapsed back into her chair, covering her face with her hands. The man stopped in front of the judge's bench. He placed the leather case on the table. He stood perfectly still. I remembered the text, "Do not speak first." I clamped my mouth shut, biting my tongue. The judge looked down at the man. He looked confused, and for the first time, a little unsettled. "State your name for the record." The judge said. The man turned. He looked at Meredith, huddled and broken. Then he looked at me. His expression did not change, but there was a flicker of something in his eyes. Recognition? Assessment? He turned back to the judge. His voice was low, deep, and sounded like gravel grinding together. "My name is Adrian Blackwell," he said. "I am the trustee of the conditional bequest, and I am here to execute the final will of Daniel Cooper." The silence in the courtroom was not empty. It was heavy, pressurized, the kind of silence that precedes a structural collapse. Adrian Blackwell stood before the judge's bench, his hand resting lightly on the leather attaché case. He did not look like a lawyer. He looked like an undertaker for secrets. "State your business, Mr. Blackwell," Judge Harrison said. The judge's voice was steady. But I saw him glance at the sealed amendment in his hand, then back at the man in the black suit. "I am here to execute the contingency protocols established by the late Daniel Cooper," Adrian said. His voice was a low baritone that carried to the back of the room without effort. "I represent Blackwell Fiduciary Services, the entity named as the conditional trustee in the amendment you now hold." "Conditional on what?" the judge asked. "On the moral conduct of the potential beneficiaries," Adrian replied. A ripple of whispers went through the gallery. Moral conduct. It was a phrase rarely heard in probate court, where the only currency was usually statute and precedent. Adrian turned slowly to face the room. He looked at Meredith, who was shrunk into her chair, her face a mask of pale terror. Then he looked at me. His eyes were dark, intelligent, and unyielding. "Daniel Cooper was a man who lived in fear," Adrian said, addressing the court. He feared that his past mistakes would destroy his family, but he feared even more that his wealth would corrupt the people he loved. In 2012, following the financial crisis that nearly destroyed this town, Daniel created a shadow trust. It was designed to remain dormant unless specific triggers were activated during the probate of his estate. "What triggers?" the judge asked. "Tampering," Adrian said. "Coercion, deceit." He opened his leather case. The snap of the latches echoed like gunshots. He pulled out a single, thick document bound in blue linen. "The amendment in your hand, Your Honor, dictates that if any beneficiary attempts to alter, hide, or destroy estate documents, the primary will is immediately voided. The assets are then transferred to the jurisdiction of the Blackwell Trust." Judge Harrison looked at the forensic report on his desk, the report confirming the missing codicil page. He looked at the copy of the Count of Monte Cristo that had been pulled from Meredith's bag. "The condition appears to have been met," the judge said dryly. "Then I must inform the court of the nature of the assets," Adrian said, "and the nature of the lie that has been told in this room." He walked to the witness stand, but he did not sit. He stood beside it, projecting an air of absolute command. "For weeks, this court has heard testimony suggesting that Daniel Cooper was funding a criminal enterprise under the name Harbor Shield," Adrian said. "The defense has implied he was hiding money. The plaintiff has feared he was hiding a crime. Both are incorrect." Meredith let out a low moan. "Stop," she whispered. "Please." Adrian ignored her. Harbor Shield was not a slush fund. He said, "It was a life support system." In 2012, Michael Rusk, the former chief financial officer of Cooper Hale, discovered a massive embezzlement scheme. It was not being committed by Daniel Cooper. It was being committed by a consortium of lenders tied to the regional banking system, lenders who sat on the board of the very foundation Meredith Cooper Hale now advises. I felt a shockwave go through me. My father wasn't the crook. He was the one trying to stop it. "Mr. Rusk intended to testify," Adrian continued, "but threats were made against his life and the lives of his children. Daniel Cooper intervened. He could not stop the banks without destroying the pension funds of his own employees, who were leveraged in those institutions. So he made a deal. He agreed to cover the losses personally, ensuring the pensions remained whole, in exchange for the safe passage of Michael Rusk. So Rusk ran?" the judge asked. "He was relocated," Adrian corrected. "Harbor Shield is a protective detail." For 12 years, Daniel Cooper paid $75,000 annually to keep a good man alive. He did not buy silence to protect himself. He bought safety for a whistleblower. The gallery erupted. I saw reporters typing furiously. The narrative of the corrupt tycoon had just been flipped on its head. My father was a hero, a flawed, terrified hero, but a hero nonetheless. "But there is a catch," Adrian said, raising his voice slightly to cut through the noise. The room quieted down. "The trust of 2012 has a final clause," Adrian said. "It states that the bulk of the Cooper estate, the millions currently in dispute, will only be distributed to his daughters if they demonstrate a willingness to participate in the truth." He picked up a document from his case. The sisters must agree to a joint disclosure of the banking irregularities from 2012. They must use the estate's resources to formally restitute any remaining gaps in the employee pension fund. If they refuse, or if they are found to be complicit in the cover-up, the trust diverts the assets permanently. "Diverts them where?" Tessa asked. "Standing up, to the National Whistleblower Center and the Cooper Hale Employee Pension Restoration Fund," Adrian said. "Every dime. The family gets nothing." Meredith stood up. She exploded. "This is insane!" she screamed. Her voice was raw, shredding her throat. "He cannot do this. It is my money. I stayed. I ran the company. I took care of him while she was playing artist in the city." She pointed a shaking finger at me. "She manipulated him," Meredith shrieked. "She wasn't even there. I was the one by his bed. I was the one managing his doctors. He is punishing me for being the responsible one." Adrian looked at her. His expression did not change. He reached into his case again. "Since you mention his medical care, Mrs. Cooper," Adrian said softly. He produced a single sheet of paper. It had a notary seal stamped in red ink at the bottom. "I have here a sworn statement, dictated by Daniel Cooper and notarized by a mobile clerk 4 months ago." He handed it to the bailiff, who passed it to the judge. "Read it," Adrian said. Judge Harrison adjusted his glasses. As he read, his face grew dark. A deep, angry flush rose from his collar. He looked up at Meredith with an expression of pure revulsion. "Mrs. Cooper," the judge said, his voice trembling with rage, "did you threaten to terminate your father's pain management protocol if he did not sign the revised will?" The room went dead silent. Meredith froze. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. "The statement is specific," the judge continued, reading from the paper. "Meredith told me that the new medical manager was expensive. She said that unless I transferred the voting shares of the company to her immediately, she would have to move me to a state facility. She said she would fire the night nurse. She said I would die alone in the dark." I felt bile rise in my throat. I put a hand over my mouth. Die alone in the dark. That was what she had threatened him with. My father, who had spent his fortune saving others, had been terrorized in his own bed by his own daughter. "It is a lie," Meredith screamed. He was confused. He was on morphine. "It is notarized," the judge roared, slamming his hand on the bench, "and it corroborates the testimony of the nurse regarding the argument heard on the night of his death." Garrett Vane, Meredith's attorney, stood up. He was pale. He began to pack his briefcase with frantic, jerky movements. "Your Honor," Vane said, his voice tight, "Ridge and Spire requests an immediate recess to discuss ethical obligations with our client." "You are withdrawing?" the judge asked. "I cannot represent a client who has fundamentally misled the firm regarding the nature of her interactions with the decedent," Vane said. He didn't look at Meredith. He looked at the door. "Motion granted." The judge snapped. "Get out of my court." Vane fled. He didn't walk. He fled. Meredith stood alone at the defense table. She looked small. The sleek, powerful executive was gone. In her place was a frightened bully who had finally run out of victims. Judge Harrison turned to the court officer. "I am ordering an immediate inquiry into the allegations of coercion and elder abuse," the judge said, "and I am referring the matter of the missing will page to the district attorney. Mrs. Cooper, you are to surrender your passport immediately. You are not to leave Ashford Glen." Meredith sank into her chair. She put her head on the table and began to sob. It wasn't the theatrical grief of the funeral. It was the ugly, jagged sound of ruin. The judge looked at Adrian. "Mr. Blackwell, the court accepts your standing. The estate is frozen. No distributions will be made until the fraud inquiry is complete." Adrian nodded. "There is one more thing, Your Honor." He turned to me. He walked over to the plaintiff's table. Up close, he smelled of rain and old leather. He looked at me with an intensity that made me want to look away, but I held his gaze. "Sarah," he said quietly. I stood up. "Yes, your father left you a choice," Adrian said. He held up a final envelope. It was sealed with black wax. "The trust has a binary outcome," Adrian said. "You can sign a statement today, a statement that places the burden of the cover-up entirely on Meredith. If you do that, the trust will view you as a cooperating beneficiary. You will receive your half of the estate immediately. You can walk away with $10 million, leave Meredith to the prosecutors, and go back to your life." I looked at the envelope. "And if I don't?" I asked. "If you don't," Adrian said, "then we open this letter. This letter contains the full, unredacted history of the Foundation's involvement with the banking crisis. It names names. It implicates powerful people in this town. It will destroy the reputation of Cooper Hale Industries. The stock will crash. The family name, your name, will be associated with a scandal that will last for a generation." He paused. "But it will also clear Michael Rusk's name," he said. "It will allow him to come home." I looked at Meredith. She was watching me now, her eyes red and swollen. "Take the deal." "Sarah," she whispered. Her voice was a ragged hiss. "Take the money. Don't burn the house down." I looked at Tessa. She was watching me, her face unreadable. "It is the easy win." "Sarah," Tessa said softly, "you get the money. You get justice against Meredith. No one would blame you." I looked back at Adrian. "Why did he give me this choice?" I asked. "Because he wanted to know," Adrian said. "He wanted to know if you were different. He told me to watch for the moment Sarah chooses who she is." I thought about the cracked photo in the empty study. I thought about the fear in Nina Voss's eyes. I thought about the man in the diner who told me my father tried to balance the scales. My father had lived a double life to protect people. He had suffered in silence to save the pensions. He had died scared because Meredith threatened him. If I took the money and silenced the truth, I would be just like her. I would be protecting my comfort at the expense of honesty. I would be letting the rot in the foundation continue. I am not her. I said, I looked at the judge. "Your Honor," I said. My voice was steady. "I do not want the settlement." A gasp went through the room. "Ms. Cooper?" the judge asked. "You are refusing $10 million? "I am refusing to inherit a lie." I said, "I want the letter entered into the record. I want the truth about Harbor Shield and the foundation to be public, if it costs me the money." "So be it," Meredith screamed. "No, you stupid, self-righteous bailiff," the judge shouted. Adrian didn't look at Meredith. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. It was a sad smile, but it was real. He handed the black-sealed envelope to the judge. "As you wish." "Sarah," Adrian said. The judge broke the seal. He pulled out the documents. He scanned them, his eyebrows rising. "This is explosive," the judge murmured. He looked up. "I am ordering this document entered into the record." The judge said, "However, due to the sensitive nature of the financial disclosures and the potential criminal implications for third parties not present, I am ordering the contents sealed for 72 hours pending a review by the federal prosecutor." He banged the gavel. "This hearing is adjourned. The estate of Daniel Cooper is remanded to the custody of Blackwell Fiduciary Services." The chaos that followed was instant. Reporters surged forward, shouting questions. "Sarah, Sarah, did you just give away your inheritance? Sarah, is your sister going to jail?" I didn't answer. I turned to Tessa. "We did it." I said, "We did." Tessa said. She looked stunned. "You just blew up the biggest fortune in Pennsylvania." "Sarah, how do you feel?" "I feel light," I said, and I meant it. The crushing weight of the last few weeks was gone. I gathered my things. I looked at the defense table. Meredith was sitting alone. The bailiff was standing behind her, waiting to take her passport. She looked up at me. There was hatred in her eyes. Yes, but there was also fear, and something else, confusion. She genuinely could not understand why I had chosen the truth over the money. That was the difference between us. That was why my father had chosen me. I walked down the center aisle. The cameras flashed, blinding white lights that turned the courtroom into a strobing nightmare. At the back of the room, Adrian Blackwell was waiting. He held the door open for me. As I passed him, he leaned in. "Your father was right," he said. "About what?" I asked, pausing. "He said you were the only one strong enough to walk away," Adrian said. He looked past me at Meredith, then back to me. "We will need to meet next week." "Sarah, the trust is complicated. You haven't lost everything, but you have changed everything." "I know," I said. I walked out of the courthouse and into the cool, damp air of Ashford Glen. The rain had stopped. The clouds were breaking apart, revealing patches of pale blue sky. I didn't know what I would do next. I didn't know if I would have enough money to pay my rent next month. I didn't know if the town would hate me or hail me. But as I walked down the marble steps, leaving the sharks and the secrets behind me, I took a deep breath. It tasted of wet pavement and ozone. It tasted clean. I was Sarah Cooper, and for the first time in my life, I knew exactly who that was. Thank you for listening to My Wealthy Sister Demanded My Inheritance in Court. Then a man in a black suit walked in and, I hope you enjoyed this journey of betrayal, justice, and family secrets. I would love to hear from you. Please leave a comment below telling me where you are listening from. I am always amazed to see how far these stories travel. If you enjoyed the story, please consider subscribing to Revenge Stories and sharing your thoughts in English. Your support helps me continue to bring these dramas to life. Until next time.